views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome, good people of the Bronx and beyond. My name is Henry Ovalles, and I'm your host for A Life in Art. On this show, we will bring you engaging and personal conversations with artists with whom you may not be familiar. People who have been working on their craft for at least a decade and are at a crossroads where passion meets necessity. Our guest today is a world-renowned hip-hop dancer and choreographer. She and her husband co-founded Full Circle Productions, which serves the community with educational and multimedia urban-themed performances. She has been co-producing the documentary All the Ladies Say to bring awareness of the history of women in hip-hop. Today we learn about Anna Rokafella Garcia's life and art.
I'm a woman of the ghetto. Won't you listen, won't you listen, won't you listen to me there just later?
And here we are in the studio with Rokafella. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, I wouldn't miss it. I mean, anytime I get to share my life, my journey, it's important. I got to be there.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. So let's dig right in. Let's start at the beginning. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Wow. Okay, so everybody knows Rokafella, the Bronx, right? But I got to tell you that I was actually born and raised in East Harlem. I was born in Mount Sinai Hospital, was a barrio child. I have a sister and a brother. My parents came from Puerto Rico. They were farmers. And they were supposed to like really make it, you know, but then the economy kind of shifted and they came to New York City in '54 or something like that.
Wow.
And so by the time I was born in the '70s, I feel like I got a good piece of some of that, you know, first generation culture in a sense. But, you know, things were changing in the '70s and '80s in New York City with the whole economic fiscal crisis. And so that's when my parents decided to move to the Bronx because we have family up here. And so that's why I always hail the Bronx, because that's where I feel like my formidable years were spent.
Right.
And so El Barrio, of course, it's like my birthplace, you know, the island, but the Bronx is really where I was starting to stake a claim of my own, you know, my personality and the things that I was exposed to. So BX baby.
A lot of influences there.
And we did go to school. We were around city lifestyle.
Yeah.
It was just hard, you know, to try to hold on to some of those traditional, you know, Puerto Rican norms.
Right.
And so that was a little bit of a tug of war that I was watching my big sister and big brother go through, because they were born 10 years.
So you're the youngest?
I'm the baby.
I see.
And so Miguel and Carmen, they're like 10 years and 9 years older than me. And so as I'm growing up, I'm watching them have this tug of war. Are they city kids or are they campo kids, you know?
Right.
And so listening to some of those old boleros and guarachas, and then now listening to rap and Motown, and you know,
Yeah.
There was that little bit of a tug of war. But for me, it was just a duality that I embraced. Both of it, all of it. Collard greens, you know.
Platanos and collard greens.
Yeah, and bacalaito with guineo, you know. Like, it was for me, it was a symbiosis.
Right.
And so when hip hop started to come about, I was there.
Right.
And I was immersed in it. It was happening everywhere.
So how about your brother and sister? So a pretty big age gap there, 9 and 10 years older.
Yeah.
Than you. Did they have any artistic inclinations?
No, they didn't. There's a lot of pressure when you're a first generation to really do good in school and, you know, reach the top. And so
Right.
art isn't the top. Art is fun, something that you do for recreation. And so there wasn't any of that.
Right, but you tend to go towards something more practical.
Totally,
Yeah.
right. Because you want to make your parents' sacrifices mean something.
Right.
So, and, you know, I don't think that art was ever an option for them.
Right.
Whereas for me, as I said, like, I was growing up in this, like, this mecca of different, how can I say, music, different art, different dances. I mean, the hustle, salsa, you know, all these, and hip hop just was informing me of this, like, you have to enjoy life, you know? And so me being the third child, I knew I had to do well in school, but there was this thing that was just calling me to be creative, to be artistic, confident. And so that's, I think, where it all started to shift for me.
Right. So what's your earliest memory? When do you think that you were bitten by the artistic bug?
Well, you know, I think on Sundays, my parents used to always turn on, you know, I don't know if it was Channel 11, but it was just where we would watch these black and white musicals, you know, with the Nicholas brothers or Julie Andrews or whatever. And so I was already starting to watch people move, people dance. And then from there, you know, the 80s, flash dance, Beat Street, you know,
Right.
Sound of Music or whatever. So I was starting to get bit by this feeling of, hey, if I can express myself, maybe I can make a life out of this. And, you know, my brother was the first person to bring a rap record into the house and play it on the radiola.
Right.
And have everybody be like, what's that? Ooh, ¿qué es eso? Eso no es música. You know, that's not music. But he was bopping his head, and so was I.
Right.
And I was learning the lyrics. Like, he played it over and over. And so when I went to school the next day, I had a grasp of the lyrics. And so the kids in school who had probably already had that record in their home, we were like going back and forth, you know, trading bars. And so hip hop was starting to become like a passport for me. I was starting to be considered cool.
Right.
And, you know, the rest is history after that.
Where did you go to school?
I went to St. Cecilia's on
Okay.
106 between 3rd and 2nd. It's no longer there. The parish is still there,
Right.
and I ended up getting married at the parish, but later, much later. But yeah, I went to a parochial school.
Right. And sort of a Catholic upbringing then for you?
Totally, completely. And so, you know, my sister and brother also went to that school, and since they were 1 year apart, they had the tuition discount. And so by the time I went, they knew of my brother and sister, so they gave my parents a discount anyway, because now they had 3 kids in
Right.
parochial school. So, you know, and I think that was the whole point of parochial school, was to give under, you know, privileged families a chance at an
Yeah.
education. And so, so I don't complain at all about my Catholic school upbringing. I feel like a lot of the values that I have today come from those like setups, those conditions. Because I went to high school at Cathedral High School, St. Patrick's Cathedral High School.
Yes.
So once again, it was like this symbiosis of like academic, but also artistic and athletic and, you know, and spiritual. Because there was
Right.
always the religious class, you know.
Yes.
So I don't complain too much about my Catholic upbringing, because I feel like I still have some of those things, you know, discipline and whatnot.
Right. Okay, so now I think that we've, you know, sort of formed a good base so that we could dig into our next segment then. So what happens, because you are, you know, a hip hop pioneer
Oh my God.
as well. So I want to, you know, talk to you a little bit more in detail about that, you know, how it started for you and what was going on, what was the scene back then. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be back with more with Rokafella right after this.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
Welcome back to A Life in Art. We are here with hip-hop dancer and historian Rokafella. So in the last segment, we got a little bit into your family life. You mentioned your brother and sister, with your brother bringing the first rap record home. You got to love the older siblings for, you know, just, they bring that culture and sort of, you know, teach you that. Do you remember what record it was that he brought by any chance?
It was Rapper's Delight.
Ah, there you go.
It really was. And of course, there's probably other songs that predate that.
Right.
But I was not going to have access to it at all.
Right.
So if it wasn't for him not bringing that, I wouldn't have just known that there's like a movement.
Yeah.
You know, and him being, if he was 18, then I was 8.
Right.
You know, so at 8 years old, I can't even go to like a record store. And I said record store. I know nowadays there is no record store. But yeah, so thank God for that.
Yeah. Well, you could still find, you know, people are getting back into vinyl now. It's sort of a new movement.
You're right.
So with the Rapper's Delight, you know, record there, what was there with your father's collection next to it?
Ramito, Eddie Palmieri, Celia Cruz, Sonora Matancera, El Gran Combo. I think it was Johnny Ventura.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. So, and there was also some Mexican music too in there, you know.
Yeah, my father's
Vicente
the same way.
Fernandez.
Gotta have it. Gotta have
Flor
it.
Silvestre. So I had a real mix of Latin music. You know, the radio was on all the time. Like even when
Right.
we weren't home, because you know, if you're Latino, you leave the radio on so people think there's someone home, and they don't go try to be a burglar, you know. But the music was just nonstop.
Fantastic.
Nonstop. And so now here it comes in my school, in the cafeteria, my friends. So once again, the music is just a backdrop to my life.
And then when is the first time that you know, encounter the B-boys and decide, all right, I want to get in on that?
Well, what's funny is that I always say that when it was at fever pitch, I wasn't participating. I was watching. I was a spectator. I always say I was in the cafeteria and people were doing it at, you know, at lunchtime, because back then people could bring boom boxes to school, you know? It was new, and so I guess, you know, rules weren't in place yet for that. But yeah, and I saw that. I saw it when I was on the way to the bodega, you know, with my mom, and she pulled me away. And so it was just happening all around me,
Right.
and I was witnessing it, but it was really complicated moves. It wasn't like something you could just jump in and do. And I didn't see too many females, although maybe one or two on TV, like Baby Love, you know, with the Rocksteady crew and Beat Street, but there weren't that many females. Of course, there were like us, like rapping on the side, us like maybe trying to do some moves on the floor, you know, during recess. But in terms of those circles, it was mostly boys.
I see.
But I liked that. And I was like, man, if I could just learn that, you know? But my brother was not into that. Neither was my sister. So my access point, it ended. You know, there were like parameters.
Right.
It wasn't until I was older that I was going to clubs and dancing house music or, you know, salsa. And I had a fake ID, so I was, you know, at 18 in these clubs, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had to find out, I have to see where did the elite go.
Yeah. And then, so how did it work? Were you like going and practicing rooms in like your bedroom, or?
Yes, I mean, you know, when you dance, you kind of attract other dancers, and so maybe after school we'd stay and do some dance moves, or if a class was canceled or a sub, well, miss, can we go in the back and just do some moves? So, you know, there was always someone to practice dance with, and
Right.
you helped each other with the new moves, the new trends, whether it's the WAP, the Daisy Duke, the Running Man, and so I started to start picking up these other steps that were not breaking, and so it was after breaking that I got to jump in and participate, and started to make a little bit of a name for myself in my school, around the block.
Right.
But it wasn't until I got the boyfriend who was like well-versed in the dance, who was like, come downtown to the clubs, go to 1018, go to the Tunnel, go to Palladium. And he had some juice, so we could just get in. Of course, I had to show my fake ID, but
Right.
that's where I really got I got caught up on how to do it and how to really be amazing. And there were girls who were doing it at that time.
Right.
And so I was exposed, I was inspired. I wanted to be at the clubs every weekend, which was problematic for me and my parents, or my brother was trying to teach me how to be a really good basketball player. And so from there, really, it is history, you know, because from the clubs, I started dancing on the street for money with the crews that you see out there.
Yeah.
I became a hitter, and I started to go on auditions and, you know, start to make my way in that realm.
Dance auditions specifically?
Dance auditions like Mary J. Blige, LL Cool J, things like that, and making some and being rejected by, you know, quite a few, because
Right.
you had to have a look, which is the other part. It's the other life lesson of being an artist, is that you will be rejected sometimes, you know, just because you don't look the part.
Yep.
Which is really hard for me to accept. It was hurtful.
Right.
But after a while, you know, you realize you can keep dancing, like life goes on, even though you don't make the audition. You will still dance, you will still get what's coming, you know, for you. And so, yeah, from there, I ran into who became my husband, Quickstep, on the street. He was a hitter as well. And he started to tell me about how hip hop was a culture. And it blew my mind, because I just thought hip hop was something on the radio.
Right.
You know, I knew like Puerto Ricans had culture. I didn't know hip hop was a culture. And so he described the four elements, you know, dance, DJ, graffiti, and the rap, and the traces, the roots of it to Africa, capoeira, the Latins who came and were the first, you know, I mean, not the first, were there at the beginning to help contribute to what the African Americans were doing. I learned a lot.
So
in
yeah,
those
he
years.
basically gave you a brief history lesson in hip hop as you're giving to us right now,
Yeah.
to myself and to our viewers. Yeah.
And then so everything changed at that point, because now hip hop was something deep. And then I was seeing how breaking had been completely eliminated. And so I kind of felt like there was an injustice there. Like, why is it that breaking isn't anymore? It's not done. It's not in the media. What happened? There was a fever, and then, you know, something that was so like massive with vocabulary and moves, it's just gone. So then I just started to pick that up as a, like, you know, a campaign or like a torch, a flag, you know. And then to be a woman in it.
Yeah, it seems to me like that was part of the appeal. Even you mentioned earlier the fact that you didn't see so many women doing
Yeah.
it. It didn't like, you know, make you go away from it. That made you sort of embrace it more.
Right.
Like you liked the challenge. Of,
Yes, and I think that the better I got for those b-boys at that time, we call it the dark ages, because breaking was kind of dead, they were kind of like, no, girls don't do this. And I was like, watch me. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take it to the limit. And I really tried to learn the hard moves, the windmills, tracks, head spins, turtles. I was like, I'm going to do what they're doing, because I know I'm strong. And I played basketball all these years. I know I can do this. And so as I started to get better with it, the name Rokafella really became like a job description. I was rocking the fellas. And
what was the origin of the name? Did you come up with it yourself, or were you sort of christened with it?
I was dancing on the street in front of Rokafella Center, and
Okay.
this cop just kept moving us. And one time, in my youthful naivete, I was like, we're making an honest dollar. Like, I don't know why you're moving us. I was like, go move the pickpocketers. And they were like, I'm sorry. I mean, he was like, you're trespassing. This is, not your property. And I was like, well, you don't know. I could be the illegitimate child of Rokafella. I could have your job. And he was like, all right, Miss Rokafella, this is your invitation. Please vacate. And so, occasionally when I would see him, that particular officer would be like, Miss Rokafella, you know what it is. And it just became like a joke.
So that was
my
the
name's
origin of
Rokafella.
it.
Yeah.
That's great.
But it just really became the name when I really got good.
Right.
And then I kind of took it again like this mission, because some people would be like, oh, I was so inspired when I saw you. And wow, how do you do that? So all of a sudden it was like, I have to represent the excellence and the potential of a woman in hip hop.
Right.
And I started to meet graffiti writers, DJs, who were kind of going through a similar type of resistance, And so I was like, I gotta do something. I gotta be more than just the B-girl, which is enough, but because I'm not speaking, it doesn't seem to get the message across that we're here.
Right.
And so I decided to do like public speaking or do, poetry, talking
Right.
about the situation. And, me and Quickstep put together a company called Full Circle Productions, and we decided to do theater productions, just very like, haphazard. You just put, some lights and,
Right.
I wrote some poetry and we had some dancing. But it really picked up. And it was at that time when hip hop theater was just starting to, make an appearance.
We'll take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll have more from and with Rokafella right after this break.
Cool.
Today, 1 out of every 4 American kids is Hispanic. Many of the future doctors who will care for us, the scientists and entrepreneurs of our country, can be your kids. And the Hispanic Scholarship Fund helps you prepare, plan, and pay for your kids' college education.
And we're back on the Life and Art with Rokafella. So we had left off sort of talking about hip hop theater, and I know that eventually you guys made it all the way to Broadway with Solar Powered.
Solar Powered, yeah.
So definitely want to talk about that. Tell me, what is hip hop theater? And I mean, you sort of mentioned that you started with just turning on some lights and sort of haphazard. So
Yeah.
how did it grow, and what is it and what does it mean to you?
Well, I mean, Quickstep was part of that very first production. It was called So What Happens Now. And it was at PS 122, Performance Space 122 in the Village. And it was the very first time ever, it was in 1992, I believe, that hip hop and theater were together on a stage. And it really caught a lot of people out there, because it was like these hip hop kids who put together rap, graffiti on their clothes, a really nice story about somebody making mistakes in the hood, and script, right? There was like dialogue, monologue, poetry, and a lot of dance. Popping and breaking. And so it felt like this was it. This should have been the template that keeps going. But as time went on, it feels like the dance and the graffiti and the DJ, all that stuff got stripped away, and people were just using like rap in their script or devising. And so then that became what is hip hop theater. And a lot of the dancers or DJs or graffiti just kind of like faded out. It wasn't part of the definition or the picture. And so Quickstep and I really tried to keep that on stage all the time, like use those elements as a storytelling medium. But, it's difficult, because I feel theater is such a long-standing institution. Mm-hmm. It really takes a long time for it to evolve, not so much evolve, but embrace new ways, new trends. Because things, this is the way we've always done it,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a theater artist myself, so yeah, I agree with you. It can get really stuffy.
Yeah, right. And sometimes
yeah.
you have to compromise if you even just want to be presented. You have a lot of like concessions you got to make. And so I think Quickstep and I have tried to be like, no, it's got to be this way. And so Solar Power was in 2002, but since then we've made interviews and Hip Hop to the Head, and we recently did Outside the Box, like Bach.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we mixed a concert pianist with a DJ and ballerinas who actually break and pop, and try to find the overlapping, but also the distinct differences between those two classic worlds. There's
Right.
classic hip hop and there's classic concert music, classic
Right,
dances.
and you're saying that for you specifically, it's important for you guys to really call it hip hop theater, for it to
Yeah.
have those elements that you mentioned, like the graffiti, like
yeah,
the
and that
DJ.
it works, that it really does work. It's just that maybe those people who are in positions of power are not convinced,
Right.
and maybe they're afraid of who's going to show up You know, are they going to tag in the bathrooms? You know, and so we still have a lot of work to do in that respect. But we love to do theater. We love to put on dance events. You know, so I think Full Circle has diversified and not just stayed in hip hop theater, because the phone's not ringing all the time.
Right.
But the bills are always coming, so you know, the company has overhead expenses, and so we just try to diversify. You know, there's Behind the Groove, which is a monthly dance party, which this summer we've got a couple of new things happening with that. All the Ladies Say is a film about B-girls, about women, that I started 10 years ago, and it's in distribution. It's on the Third World Newsreel catalog. People can purchase it and download it. And I do have screenings. I'm working on a part 2.
Oh, I see.
You know, I have music. We do workshops. We do travel. You know, sometimes to do some university, you know, seminars, or maybe just an assembly at a high school. And so Full Circle has had to really, you know, create different platforms, because it just couldn't survive on just hip hop theater.
Yeah.
Because it's just, that's a difficult lane. And so being a New Yorker, you know, you have to.
Right,
Right?
And let's talk about that a little bit now, because obviously, you know, you started as a B-girl, let's say, and, you know,
Yes.
breaking,
Yes.
and then sort of evolved, and when you met your now husband, Quick Step, and
Yes.
started getting deeper into the culture of hip-hop and what that means. For you as an artist, what did you feel that you needed to do something else? You alluded in an earlier segment that you felt that you had to speak out. I know that you also, these lovely earrings that you're wearing, you make
Yes,
yourself,
I
yes?
do. I design fat lace earrings. I have a website for them, and it just came one day when I was in the hospital.
Right.
My mother passed away in 2014, and so I spent a lot of time on that journey with her in the hospitals, you know. So I was like, well, let me see what I can do, and I just got creative with a pair of fat laces and a hoop. And then before you know it, I was like, oh, these are great. These are like a great throwback to the old fat lace, you know, fashions.
Right.
So for the hip hop heads, it's about the fat lace. But I do have other ones that are not fat lace, and so I put them on my music page, because I do have music. I sing, I write songs. I perform with a band or solo. So I put them there.
So dance is your first love? Do you love it more than you love, you know, writing poetry or creating jewelry, or
Yes.
is it all? Yes, you
I
do.
believe that dance is my forte, my expertise. It's just that it has branched out, you know, into these other realms that are still related to the dance. And so filmmaker, but it's still, you know, dance films. Music, but it's still, you know, got this driving beat behind it. It's not ballads. You know, my songs are very, like, upbeat. You know, when I do teach workshops or speak, you know, at seminars or for a graduating class, a purchase or whatever, I use the dance as a metaphor, you know, that you have all this time of study, and that even when you're good, you still have to test yourself out in the field, and that there's all this growth that happens after you've graduated, you know, so to speak. And so dance is really, I feel like it's a throne, and then from there I can visit different chambers in the palace or whatever to continue the pun, you know. But yeah, I've learned a lot with hip hop about myself, you know, not, you know, because when I first came out into hip hop, I was very feisty, and now I know that you really have to navigate, you know, and you really have to switch your approach depending on who you're talking to and what circle you're in, because some people are just not on the same page.
Right.
And so you have to be able to rework how you're proposing something, because if not, they'll just shut the door. And they're like, nope, I know someone who looks like you or acts like you, no. And so you have to kind of, like, you know, revamp and improvise.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important that you're mentioning that, and that's a tool that artists sometimes lack or aren't even aware that they should be developing.
Right.
But I think it should happen organically, you know, and like you're talking about yourself, your evolution as an artist, and also going back to Full Circle Productions, how that company has had to evolve into not just hip-hop theater, but informing people what hip-hop theater really is, and then branching out some more. So talk to me a little bit more about Full Circle Productions. How did that come to be? When did you and Quick Step, you know, found it, and then what's its purpose?
Well, Quick Step founded it in 1992 because he felt like the elements were being detached from being this one umbrella thing, like hip-hop. It was then becoming just rap. The DJs were experiencing this, like, extinction of vinyl. You know, everything was becoming digital. Graffiti, where was it? Like, there was a moment where it just was, you know, nowhere to be found. And, you know, the dance, it just became this street jazz thing, you know, where people were, you know, misappropriating it. And a lot of the veterans were not being used as consultants on video shoots or film shoots. You know, so he was like, I gotta do this Full Circle thing, sort of like, you know, an homage to the Zulu Nation that also was trying to bring these elements together. And so that's when he founded it. He had two original members, B-Boy Storm from Germany, who was dancing on the street with Quick, and Clown from the Bronx. But I came in '94, and I was like, you know, we have to make it a little more like a company. And my friend Violeta from East Harlem, who has Kiara 3Ts, was like, make it a nonprofit. It's a little bit more work, but you can get grant funding. And so that was how we really began to get support. Saying that we're an organization that provides, you know, training for people who want to do theater or just hip-hop classic dance, from amateur to professional. We got a board together and got some grant writers and made our way, you know. But Full Circle really is about trying to preserve the original thing, but also embrace this new manifestation of it. So if they're flexing and bone breaking and twerking now, we have to be able to incorporate that in all of our shows, so that it's not just the purest, oh, this is the golden age. No, this hip hop continues.
Well, that's great that you're open-minded enough to you know, to let those things in and to know that that's for it to continue to breathe. It has to evolve.
Yes.
In that way.
And that the young people who come get to see what the history was.
Right.
And that the older people who are there can learn some of these new steps. You know. So, you know, and the last show that we did outside the box, we had a moment where we did the Little Man Anthem, which is like, you know, fast pace. It's from this guy, this rapper from Jersey, and everybody's doing it.
Right.
And so it's like a moment of saying, hey, we're with you. And at one time we were just like you. We were with breaking and everybody was like, what's that breakdance thing? And now it's accepted, but now they're looking at your dance like, what's that? Right? So we're just trying to say that we're all going through this struggle to express ourselves and feel free, feel confident. And so that's pretty much what Full Circle is. And I believe Quickstep and I had, when we met, we had these same like ideas. We just, you know, didn't know we were going to become business or entrepreneurs.
No, that's beautiful what you're saying. And again, talking about your friend Violeta, I think it is that you had that, you know, person in your life that said, oh no, you got to go the nonprofit route.
Right.
Because you do have to think about, obviously there's the artistic side, but then there's also the business side, and then there's the marketing side, and they're equally, you know, important. To get your work out there.
Yes, that is it.
So as we're wrapping up here, we got just, you know, a little bit left.
Okay.
One of the questions that we like to ask here is, you know, if you had it to do over again, would you choose the artistic path? And you, I mean, are always talking to young people with Full Circle, and now you've, you know, given talks at NYU and Howard and Purchase.
Yeah.
So what do you say to folks that sort of want to follow the path that you blazed before them?
Well, if I had to do it again, I definitely wouldn't change a thing.
Right.
All the struggle, the pain, the triumphs, the victories, it's great. And it's what has formed me to continue to have hope in what I'm doing, to know that the universe will meet me halfway. As long as I'm busy, I will be okay. The other thing that I usually tell young people is that it's just, you have to work. You really have to be committed to putting in the extra time. It'll all come back, but you have to put this work. There's no shortcuts. And so that's usually what I tell a lot of the young people, whether I'm speaking at a university or speaking to middle schoolers. I'm like, you have to work. Just because YouTube gives you a little tutorial, you know, on how to fix a leaky pipe doesn't make you a plumber.
Right.
So it's just being able to believe in blood, sweat, and tears, and to know that something is yours. No one's going to take it from you, but you have to show up. You have to kind of take that initiative and believe and work hard. So that's pretty much the message.
That'll do it for me. Work hard. Thank
Yeah.
you so very much. I
Thank you.
really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank
so
you,
we've run out of
Henry.
time, as we tend to do.
It's okay.
So thanks to Rokafella for sharing her life and art with us, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We do want to encourage you to connect with us on social media. Visit us on Facebook and YouTube at A Life in Art, and Instagram and Twitter at A Life in Art TV. We'll be back with more stories from emerging artists when we return with A Life in Art.